There was a television edit of the thing going back to 1986. It dubbed over foul and inflammatory language, added a few extra seconds here and there not included in the theatrical release, and finished with an alternate ending, thankfully forgotten and discarded, that was less ambiguous but somewhat more of a downer than Carpenter's. The one thing that stood out, which is the topic of this video, was the voiceover to narrate every character. A voice that must have been pulled from the HR department to give us new character names like Windows, MacReady, Cluck, Kappa, Palma, and Nulls. Often show and not tell was more effective, but not if you're a television executive, because they believe spoon-feeding the audience is paramount to understanding the story.
Windows. Hates being a radio operator. Hates being here. Can't wait to get back to the States.
Windows is introduced as a radio operator who doesn't like his job or want to be there. I think we get that he operates the radio visually. His salty attitude, directed to Blair, is more effective displaying his frustrations than being told in third person, I think.
MacReady, a top helicopter pilot, worked for Hughes Aircraft as a test pilot until he got into a confrontation with top management and resigned to take this assignment.
MacReady is shown as a chess player on a wonderful machine for the early 80s. But we have to be told he's a helicopter pilot. His attitude with the Scotch does more than his reported problems with upper management. Seeing him pilot the helicopter gives us enough clues that Mac pilots the helicopter. The theatrical version made his argumentative attitude more organic.
Childs, a mechanic who went from trade school to the airlines. None better.
Childs is a mechanic from the airline industry and none better. That's all we get from the narrator, as if that filled a gaping hole in our hearts. In the theatrical release, Childs is the go-to person for hands-on solutions, whether it's a flamethrower or an axe. This is another example of showing and not telling.
Gary, a 30-year Army man who worked up through the ranks to become an officer. Likes the job of station manager.
Gary, the only useful trivia that was heavily implied in the film regardless, was that he was an army man and was accustomed to being in charge. That really comes across when he arbitrarily ended the confrontation outside the base, a trait reinforced by Palmer.
I was wondering when El Capitan was going to get a chance to use his pop gun.
Clark, in charge of the dogs, doing a study on the effects of extreme cold on animal behavior.
Clark, he's in charge of the dogs. Now the mystery has been solved. Thank you, CBS. We did learn how the station was using the dogs for tests. It didn't matter to anyone.
Dr. Kappa, graduate of Harvard Medical School, received his training at Massachusetts General Hospital. A personal tragedy in his life sent him on this adventure.
Copper, here's a doctor with quite a prestigious education. He's incomplete without knowing of the ambiguous and never again mentioned personal tragedy that had him seek adventure and isolation. The man was clearly a doctor doing doctor things and a humanitarian in times of the Cold War. He was willing to risk his life for a chance to save others. That and the nose piercing did more for his character than the voiceover.
Bennings, meteorologist, an old pro. Many papers published in his field.
Bennings was a character that had little opportunity to define himself. Other than being a friend of Gary's, he did have one line inferring his occupational specialty.
Winds are going to let up a tad next couple of hours. A tad?
Blair, a pioneering microbiologist whose research on DNA helped lay the foundation for genetic engineering. Many discoveries in the field of cellular growth.
Blair, he gets pumped up by the narrator. Do we really need to know about his research into DNA and was a microbiologist? Or could we have figured it out ourselves? He was really a smart man who discovered something terrible too early, and the others weren't ready to understand.
Palmer, second-string chopper pilot, crack mechanic, who hopes to start up his own business as a mechanic upon completion of this assignment.
Palmer. What we got out of the narration was a more solid backstory from a character on film more foggy than the smoke he's smoking. And I don't think it was for the better. It's certain, on television, he was a backup helicopter pilot, and not kidding, and a backup mechanic. Was it because he was quick on the fire extinguisher? What's confusing was the bit of information about Palmer's future, as if the man had plans after watching the final tape of Let's Make a Deal.
Norris, geophysicist, was a professor at Caltech, has an incipient heart condition.
Norris was a professor, a geophysicist, and had a heart condition. The first didn't matter. The second piece of trivia was given reference in a single line, likely the reason he tagged along.
I'd say the ice it's buried in is 100,000 years old, at least.
And third, couldn't be more obvious and better revealed in a not-so-subtle hint later.
Knowles, inventive cook. A product of what? Interested in the Antarctic.
Knowles. In the theatrical release, we figured he's a cook because we see him in the kitchen. Made a reference about his place of work.
I don't know
One
what
of you disrespectful men been tossing his dirty drawers in the kitchen trash can. Huh? But now I want my kitchen clean, alright?
But that wasn't good enough for television. He had to be an inventive cook, from Watts, and out of the whole crew, the most curious about the Antarctic. Here's a piece of trivia. We never see anyone eat his cooking, and even Fuchs suggested canned food. Speaking of Fuchs,
assistant biologist who worked with Blair at the Rockefeller Foundation.
we see a quiet man who hangs around the doctors, Blair and Copper, who later gets an unwanted promotion. The scene in the snowcat with Mac was everything that the narrator told us explicitly.
These men were commissioned by the United States National Science Institute to gather data concerning the physical and natural sciences on the continent of Antarctica.
Kindly consider leaving a like, share, or subscribe if you enjoyed this video. This is Mr. G of Synergy saying, believe in physical media. Check out other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching. Please visit my main channel, Synergy. You'll find more The Thing videos there too.